The following is a demonstration of a classification pilot that Convergence Data did for Honeywell. I'm showing you the results of that pilot, which is also contained in a DVA report. This DVA report contains what we did for the project, what issues we found, and some of the key findings. This will complement the demonstration I'm about to show you. Convergence Data is a parts classification company. We have software tools for helping companies like Honeywell build out very structured classification structures. I'm going to show you an example of what we did with some sample parts provided by Honeywell. Honeywell provided us, in the Smart Class module, they provided us some electronic components, some capacitors, fixed capacitors, variable capacitors, resistors, and some semiconductors. And what we did is we built out a classification structure, a category structure, which included the following attributes on each category. So these are fixed resistor category attributes. And you can see there's a variety of string and numeric attributes, including new, long, and short descriptions. So this is a fairly small structure because we only work with a very specific amount of parts. The parts that Honeywell gave us were in this spreadsheet. So they gave us their part number, their current descriptions, and their current manufacturer part numbers. Many of these manufacturer part numbers needed to be fixed. They weren't correct, so it's one of the first things we did is fix the manufacturer part numbers before we started gathering the classification data. Back to the software analysis, software demo in DFR. So we built out this classification structure for the items in that spreadsheet. But typically, a classification structure is much broader. And you can see here, this would be an example of a classification structure that might work for a company like Honeywell. And you can see all the categories listed here. Some of these are HVAC type categories like compressors and coils. Some of these are electronics. Some of these are mechanical. So if I click on electronics and components, you can drill your way all the way down to electrical components, PCB components, and work your way all the way down through the structure. So the next step of the project was to collect the attribute data. And so we're displaying the attribute data for these parts in our search application called SmartFind. And you can see here on the home page, you could do a category search. If you just type in a term like capacitor, if I spell it correctly, you can see all the categories that have capacitor, or you can click through these icons to get to the specific categories you're most interested in. We're going to start by showing you the Honeywell electronic components. So here are the two major categories as shown in that structure in Smart Class, semiconductors and passives. Here are the passives. I'm going to show you the capacitors, the fixed capacitors. So on the left here are some of the more important attributes that we'd use for searching and filtering and their associated values for this small sample of 115 fixed capacitors, which all came from that spreadsheet I showed you earlier. Here is all the data that we were able to collect against that classification structure. You can see them across the top of the page, including new descriptions. Some of these are string attributes, some of these are numerics with units of measure, and some are URLs. If I click on one of these, you can get a view of what a single part looks like and the amount of information that was collected. You can see it listed here, like I mentioned before. Some have units of measure, the numeric. Here is a new short description that we created. Here is a link to the URL where we got a lot of the information for this particular capacitor. We can also do a duplicate analysis on this. So we had a larger sample. We can see that there's 79% potential duplicates in this small sample of 115. And we were looking at, here's a sample of 10 very similar capacitors that have the same voltage, mounting type, material, and capacitance. So this is obviously valuable information for Honeywell to investigate for potential rationalization and cost savings. Another thing we want to show you is if we had pricing on these items, how we could store the pricing for electronic components. So here I am in some sample motors. These aren't Honeywell motors, but just illustrative of how we support pricing. If I click on one motor, you'll see a new tab here that we didn't have in the Honeywell data called pricing. And you can see there is pricing information, and you can see they're coming from different locations. So you might have a plant in China buying these parts at a certain price from a certain vendor, and you might have a plant in Mexico buying the same parts at a completely different price, also using a different vendor. So this is important information the sourcing organization could use, along with this attribute data that we provide to go after cost savings on the sourcing side of the business. So as I mentioned, this is in conclusion of our short video. I recommend looking at the PowerPoint presentation that goes along with it, called the DVA report, Data Value Analysis, for the Honeywell parts. Thanks for your time today.